Begin the current Daf, Mesechtes Gitin Daf Lamed Ches. We begin on the bottom of Lamed Zayin Beis, 4 lines up at the bottom of the Yomid, where the Gemara continues explaining our halacha of our previous Mishnah based on the machlekes Abaye and Rava. As we're going to shortly explain, they had a machlekes regarding this halacha, the Mishnah of an Eved that was taken captive and then was redeemed. The Tanakama said it depends if it was for the purposes of being an Eved, then he'll be mishtabed. If it was to be ben chayrin, then he will not be mishtabed. Rabbi Shloimy says benkach, either way is going to be mishtabed. And when machlekes Abaye and Rava, if this is talking about lefnei yish or la'ach yish, and then we explain the details of how you explain the machlekes based on that criterion, as we'll go shortly, quickly review that. Shiur corresponds to Bakazdik and the Ches, concerned from the Pachaim, going to today's daf. So discussing today's daf are, like we said, the Gemara mentioned the machlekes Abaye and Rava and the understanding of our Mishnah of an Eved, the slave that was taken captive and it was redeemed, and their explanation of thus Rabbi Yochanan's statement of Eved Shabarach Mibeis Asurim regarding when a slave runs away from captivity, from jail, that he's Yatz L'Cheres. Not only that, but actually forced the master and he has to try to get shiur. How we're going to explain that teaching based on the different opinions of Abaye and Rava regarding the slave that was taken captive. Some important terms of concepts in today's daf are called Mashacher Avdoi Over Basei. Whoever frees his slave violates a positive commandment. Rabbi Marav says, Hamakdish Abdo, if he just sanctifies the slave, Yotz L'Cheres, it goes out free. Why does it go free? Because, as we'll explain the Gemara in detail, when you're being Makdishim, what does it mean Makdishim? He's not a carbon, you're not taking him and shechting his head. It's the Lahava Am Kaddish comment that he should be from the holy nation, and therefore, that means to say he should become a full-fledged Yid, and therefore, essentially, you're freeing him. The contradicting brayso, however, regarding Hamakdish Nechasav, if someone says, Alaman Famegin, he's sanctifying all his stuff, and there were slaves in there, Bistam the Eved does not become free. The question is, why not? So if you're Makdish, then automatically he becomes free. Why over there do we say that he does not become free? Now, regarding Hamafker Avda, not Makdish, but Hamafker Avda, if someone declares a slave Hefker, that Yatz L'Cheres, it goes out free, the machlek is whether he still requires a shtar shiur. Rabbi Yochanan say he needs to get shiur still. You're mafkin, but you never went and emancipated him for the Isser Shabbat. And Shmuel says, no, ain't so get shiur. You don't have to. He's hefker, and he's a free man. He does not need a shtar shiur. So in the Gemara, again, the Gemara mentioned the machlekes Abaye and Rava and understanding of the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said, Eved Shenishba for Du'u. The Eved Kanani of one person was captured by Akum and then redeemed by another person. So you had a machlekes Abaye and Rava. Abaye had said that the Mishnah is talking about lifnei yish. So the first owner did not relinquish ownership. So this is how you understand the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said, Lishum Eved, if this other person, this Levi, whoever this guy is redeeming this slave for the purposes of being an Eved, Yishtabit to who said Abaye? It's L'Rabbi Rishon. Of course, it's before Yish. So if you're redeeming him to be a slave, it's going to be by the first one. But if let's say he's doing a L'Shum Ben Chayrim for the purposes of a free person, so we had Machlekes in the Mishnah Tanakama Rishon Gamliel. Tanakama said, Lo Yishtabit, to who is he not Mishubit to? He's not Mishubit to either one. Not L'Rabbi Sheni, because he redeemed him to be a free person, so of course not becoming enslaved to the guy who's redeeming it. And it's not going to be Mishtabit L'Rabbi Rishon either. Why not? That was the big question. If it's Lefnei Yish, Abaye is explaining it. Why is he not Mishubit to the first master? Oh, because Dilma Mimni will Pirki. People are not going to want to redeem him because I'm going to redeem him to be Yenim Zal Eved. I'm not going to redeem him. So David Tanakama said, Al Tikun Oilam, so people should redeem. We say he's not going to be Mishtabit L'Rabbi Rishon. Shimon said, no, Benkach. No, either way, he's going to be enslaved. What's the reason for that? It's because people are not going to refrain from redeeming a captured, because Kashem Shem Mitzvah Lift is B'nei Chayim, just like Mitzvah redeem a free person. Kach Mitzvah Lift is Avodim. Who cares? It's still different about being a free person or not a free person. As a knecht, okay, he's a slave, but still he's a regular person, and therefore people will redeem him, and therefore there's no reason to remove the ownership of the first master, who it's still before years, and therefore he will be mishtabed. That's the machlekes Tanakama Shem according to Abaye. Rava said a different interpretation. The Mishnah is talking about la'acha yish. The first owner did relinquish ownership of the Eved. Tanakama, now how do we explain the Mishnah based on that? So Tanakama said that if the guy's redeeming him for the purpose of being an Eved, so he said yishtabit to who? According to Rava, it's not yishtabit l'Rabbi Rishon, it's yishtabit l'Rabbi Sheni, because it's acha yish. It doesn't belong to the first owner anymore. He was miyayish. But the second I was redeeming him, I'm redeeming you to be my Eved. I'm not redeeming you to a Stam Azoi, so then he'll be his Eved. But if he's doing it L'Shum Ben Chayrin, then lo yishtabe is not going to be mishubed, not l'Rabbi Rishon, of course not l'Rabbi Rishon, because la chayish, it's not his anymore, and not l'Rabbi Sheni, because he's redeeming it for the purpose of being a free person. Rabbi Shloimy said, no, benkach and benkach yishtabe, in both cases it belongs to the first owner. The first owner, but shaychus, according to Rava, it's la chayish. Why in both cases, whether he's deeming him to be an eved or ben chayrin, he becomes an eved of the first master? Yes. We don't want, if a slave realizes I'm taken captive and I get redeemed, I go free. So good, you know what I'll do? I'll figure out a way, I'll walk down the wrong block, I'll get captured by these thugs, and then I'll get redeemed, and I'll go out a free person. So we don't want every eved to think he can get a way out of doing that. So therefore, to avoid them, said, no. Whatever happens, you're going to be redeemed. Anyway, you're going right back to the slavery, and therefore, it's not going to help you at all. That's the understanding of Rava, according to that of Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. So now the Gemara, on the 4 lines up at the bottom of the Yamid, on the Daf Yomi, now explains as follows. Ulu Rava. According to Rava, that's why I have to go through it, because it's very technical in understanding the different opinions of this halacha. So according to Rava, the Amid that he said, La'achar yiur, she said, our Mishnah was talking about, as we just described, that it's talking about after years. Ula Rabbi Sheni. We said that this, if he takes him l'shum eved, he's miyishtabed. We said it's going to be to the second master. So the question is, Rabbi Sheni miman kanilai. Whom is the second master, this new guy who is redeeming this guy's eved, acquiring this eved from? Because mishabai, from the captors? You're buying him from the captors? Shabai gufi mikanile? Meaning, you're not getting him from the original owner. The original owner was miyayish, but who are you getting the kinyan? Where are you getting the rights to buy him from? From the captors? Or you think the captors acquired the eved? Now you could buy, because the captors are goyim. So the eved, you think you have a way to be kind of the eved from goyim? Did the goyim own the eved? So the Gemara says, yes, they acquired him. Because kanile lemaisa yada, be right. Although that they don't own his body, but they acquired his handiwork. A Yisrael could buy it from them for his activity, for his actions, for his handiwork, for his work, for his physical labor, with money. Now, his body, yes, he'll acquire when he toivels him in the mikvah to be an eved, as the Gemara says in Yavamas, in Perkei Chotzav and Vav Medalef, where even if he circumcised and he toiveled by his first master, the captors will acquire the slave because the original owner was miyayish, he gave up hope, as Rav explained, and they'll acquire his mais yadayim for his labor, because even the Yisrael could also be acquired to a non-Jew for the Jew's labor. Now, although Yisrael would leave the non-Jew by Yovel, but an Eved will be enslaved forever. So, therefore, says the Gemara, of course, what's the problem? This new Yid is going to buy this Eved, since it was La'achayish of the first guy, and the captors do acquire not the physical body, as the Gemara is going to bring right now, but his labor they could own, and that's what he's buying. Now, Lamaisa, he'll own the slave, even his goof, but that'll be when he tables in the mikvah to be an Eved. But Maisi Daim is what he could buy. That's how he's acquiring the Eved from the guy, because Amr Shlaka, she says as follows. How do we know that a non-Jew could acquire another non-Jew for his labor? It says the passing of Yikra. It says, and also from those sons of those who dwell, of the residents, who dwell with you. Mehem tiknu, from them you could buy, meaning, because we're talking about that certain people, you had to wipe them out when you came to Eretz Yisrael. But those who come from other places, because the Rashi explains the word mehem tiknu, the words we have argues is ribuyahu, but really the Rashash has to say miutehu, meaning it's actually saying from them you could buy, but not from others, because previously the pasuk had said mehem tiknu eved va'ama, and then it says v'gam ne'atashim hagorim emachem. Again, it says mehem tiknu. It shouldn't have said again mehem tiknu. So what's mehem tiknu coming to say? To say, oh, atem kain mehem, you could purchase from them, meaning from the other nations that were born when one of the spouses were not from the Canaanim, but you could buy from them as the Gitin Daf of Lamed Chesem and Al. But v'loi heim kain, but they cannot acquire one of mekem of you, and v'loi heim kain mezemezeh, neither could they acquire each other. So a Jew could acquire a non-Jew, but a non-Jew cannot acquire a Jew, or another non-Jew. So that's what the pasuk mehem tikna. From them you could purchase, but they cannot purchase you, and they cannot acquire another non-Jew. Now, you would think they wouldn't be able to acquire each other. So the Gemara jumps in and says, what? You would think they cannot acquire each other? And you come and tell me how they could? Haman just says, they cannot acquire each other. What are you saying? You would think that they're not. What do you mean you think they're not? They cannot. That's what the Bryce is saying. They cannot acquire each other to own his physical body, that he should require a get to and be emancipated from him. Or if, let's say, he runs away and he's Megayer, he'll be permitted in a Jewish woman because his body is not owned to his friend. But so now we know that they cannot acquire each other to own his actual physical body. But you would think even further that he cannot acquire him for his labor. That you say that they could. Because if a non-Jew, Yisrael, kind of could acquire a Jewish person for his labor, which a pasuk in B'Yikra, Perkafei, B'Chisasig Yad Ger, or the Ger, the non-Jew that's a resident convert, that's a Ger Taishav, that he's not Jewish, just keeps the 7 Noahide laws, he could acquire a Jew, and you have to redeem the Jew, whatever. So it isn't all the more so if a non-Jew could acquire a Jew, for sure he could acquire a non-Jew. So therefore, that's how you know that the captors could acquire the Eved, because we see they could acquire Nachamensh Lemaisi Adayim. And that's how this other person that's redeeming the slave will acquire the slave. So think about, wait a second. Maybe say Hanamili, when did we say this halacha? That a non-Jew could acquire another non-Jew is bekaspa, is with money, because that's similar to the halacha that you're bringing from, where a non-Jew could acquire another Jew is with money. Because it says in the pasuk over there, Mekesa Meknasai, where the Jew who sold to the non-Jew that you have to redeem him is from the monies that he originally purchased, and then you go and you pay out the rest, the remaining balance. Now, the acquisition of one non-Jew to another non-Jew is learned out from the acquisition of a Jew to a non-Jew. So maybe say, wait a second, maybe that's only with money. But by taking possession, a captor, how does he acquire this Eved from the original Jewish owner? Is because he made a chazaka, he took hold of him, with the original owner being miyayish. When his master was mafkir, when he gave up hope of him, then they make a chazaka. What's the chazaka? How you acquire Ebed Kanani? It's a chazaka of like avdus, meaning of making a status of slavery. How so? He makes the guy get him dressed, put on his shoes, bathe him to his master, as the Brisa teaches in Kedushin Achav Beis Amud Beis. Now, although a Jewish person could acquire a non-Jew with chazaka, because avodim are compared to karkais, and just like karka is acquired with chazaka, so to an Ebed, but one non-Jew cannot acquire a piece of property with a chazaka like Yisrael, because all the acquisitions of a non-Jew are always with kesef. So why do you tell me that the way this under the Yiddilah can buy this Eved from the captors is because the captors acquired this Eved with chaz? How do you acquire him? They didn't buy him. He took him. He captured him. But that would only be that now you could acquire him with a chazaka by establishing, just like you make your chazaka on the characters, like you walk around the boundaries, dvas dibis the udon, and how you show that you're the udon of the Eved. Timich those timich that's but that's a chazaka. But where do you know the halacha that a Eved could do a akum could do a kinyan? This is with kesef. You never find he could do chazaka. So v'azoi how is he acquiring this Eved to say that now the Yidel is buying it from this captive? From Vayim Kaivsta, who are you buying it from? From him? I know he could be kind, but Mevelch kinyan, the kesef. He didn't pay anything over here for this guy just to capture him. Maybe he did a chazaka, but who said chazaka doesn't work? So Amar Papa, he says, Amoin Umayav Tiaru Besichen. What does that mean? He's saying the nations of Ammon and Moab were purified by Sichen. So what that means to say is that there's a pasuk in Devarim Perek Beis that says Al Tatzres Moab. The Jewish people are not supposed to bother Moab. And so too regarding Bnei Ammon it says Al Tetzochem. Don't bother them. Now, there's a pasuk in Mamid Chafaf that says Ki Cheshbon Ir Sichen. Cheshbon was a city of Sichen. Now Cheshbon was really part of Moab. So obviously we see that when Sichen conquered Moab, it is matar gevein, meaning he made it pure for us to take what used to be part of Moab, because it's not Moab anymore. Sichen conquered Moab. Now we could conquer Sichen. That the Rebbeinu Shalom never told us we can't do. So it's like matar given, it's a kushit in the geld, That's like, you're allowed to, now suddenly you're allowed to take it. So too by Bnei Ammon, we find that by Yiftach, it says in Sefer Shoftim, that the agents of Bnei Ammon said to him that the Yiddish people took our land. When they came up from Egypt, from Arnon till Yabok. Now, wait a second. That was Ammon? We find when they conquered the land of Sichon, it says, the Yishas Artzai me Arnon ad Yabok. So obviously, that Sichon had conquered those lands from the people of Ammon. Then the Jewish people conquered it from Sichon. And he was like purified it through him that it's called laundering. It's you're not allowed to take it from Ammon and Moav. What? No. So it's Ammon and Moav, and you now take from them, the Rebbe Shalom said, but no problem. Sichon conquered it from them. And now you could take it from Sichon. But what's the main point? The main point is, how did Sichon get it from Ammon and Moav that now we're getting it from Sichon? He got it by force, by chazaka. So therefore you see that a guy could acquire from his friend property when you conquer mit the chazaka. And therefore the same thing is by the Eved. Since the original owner was mafker him, so to speak, when he was meyayish, when he gave him hope, like we're explaining, that's what Rabbi explained in the Mishnah, like, so now the Goyish captor acquired him mit a chazaka. Like you see by Ammon and Moav, that the same thing Sichon acquired it with the chazaka, and that's how the Yidden are allowed to take those lands. So, okay, says the Gemara, fine, you proved to me from Ammon and Moav with Sichon that one guy could acquire another guy by a chazaka. But Yisrael Menalan, how do you know a non-Jew to do the same thing with a Yisrael? Because as Rashi explains, this Eved is nicht a guy. He's shaykh by mitzvahs. This Eved Kanani, he has to keep all the mitzvahs like a woman. So there's a Yid. So where do you see that it would work to do the same thing with a Yid, not just from another guy? So on that, the Gemara brings a different source. It says a pasuk about Midbar, that it says when the Kanani heard that the Jews were vulnerable, so they went and they vayilochem Yisrael, they fought with the Jewish people, and it says v'yish mimenu shevi, that they took a captive from the Jewish people. Ooh, and the fact that they called the Jewish person as a captive, obviously that there was a kinyan azah with a chazaka, that now that the Canaanim had acquired that Jewish person. And therefore, you see that even a Jewish person can be acquired as a captive, and hence kashering, again, for the same idea that Rabbi has to explain for this halacha of what we're saying, how the second Yid could acquire it from the captive, from the captives. Okay, now, going back to the halacha of the Mishnah, that will continue this theme, Amar Rav Shimon bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So it's important to understand that this is Rabbi Yochanan, because the Gemara is going to ask a contradiction on this. He said the following halacha: Eved, a non-Jewish slave of a Jew that was taken captive, but then shebarach mi beis hasurim, he ran away from jail. He broke out of Alcatraz from the non-Jews, and he escaped. The halacha is yotz l'chedes. He goes out to be a free man. He's not going to be enslaved to his master anymore. Not only that, we force his master because he get shiur, and he has to write a document of emancipation to permit him now to marry a Jewish woman. But not only is he free monetarily, but he's also free in regarding to Jewish law, that he can marry a Jewish woman. That's the halacha of B'yechon.
Every Kanani that's captured by going the mitzvahs of Nashim,
Yeah, so that's a good question. That's a good question. What? No, because if it depends what the chayri would be chayv, but the shaila is if you say the guy was kind to him, what happens then? Does he lose that status? Not, because once a yid is always a yid. He's not removed from that. Right, it's chayim mitzvah, right. So shaila is what that status is. What is that halacha? Because when he's redeemed, it automatically becomes a yid. So what happens? Could he remove that status? Or if he sells it to a guy, you're not supposed to sell it to a guy. What happens then? We'll see that later on, actually, and I think in this Masechta that you see these cases when he does sell him to a guy, what happens? Then we force him to free him, and then he's a yid. Well, when we make him an Eved, he's mal, but when he makes him into an Eved, Canaan, he's malhim. And his whole shiloh, if he doesn't want to do the Mila, you hold on to him for a year, and this and that, whatever. That's why when it talks about the Karm Pesach, that whole conversation comes up. So, but the Gemara has a following question. Now, we learned in the Mishnah, Shimon Lil Omer. He said, Beinkach, whether if this new Yidela redeemed this Eved, he says, oh, this is Yenem's Eved, oh, let me redeem him. So whether he redeems him to be an Eved, or Beinkach, whether he redeems him to be a free man, Reb Shimon Lil said in the Mishnah, Yishtabed, he's going to be enslaved. Okay. So what do you want from this? So the problem is, we're asking contradiction of Rabbi Yochanan himself. Because in the halach of our Mishnah, there's an opinion of Rabbi Shimon Lil. And we know Rabbi Yochanan says, wherever Rabbi Shimon Lil is mentioned in our Mishnayos, halacha is like him. Chutz mi arev v'tzidon v'raya achrayna. We explained in many other places in Shas, but those are three different places where, okay, that's when we won't rule like him. But everywhere else, like in our Mishnah, we would rule like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Wait a second. You told me that you have this Eved who escaped from Alcatraz. He's going to be a free person, which means that when the guy's a captive, and then he's let out, he's a free man. And yet here you quote in our Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who you said Allah is like him, and there you say that Ponk Fakert, no matter how he's getting redeemed, whether if the guy's redeeming him is to be an Eved, to be Ben Chayran, doesn't make a difference, he's going to be enslaved. Well, what do you mean? I thought he should go out free. So Rabbi Yochanan himself contradicts himself. So the Gemara says, wait a second, not so fast. Bishlam Labai, this is why it was so important to review the Machlekes Abai and Rava. Bishlam Labai, the Mukila Lahai, how did he explain the halach of our Mishnah? Of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the whole Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, was lifnei years. That's how Abai explained the whole Mishnah was based on before years. Oh, okay. That's when he's going to be enslaved because 5 years, the owner didn't give up hope. I don't care what you redeemed him for whatever purpose. It's man aknech. So he goes back to me. Oh, but Vahai, Rabbi Yochanan that said that he goes free is lacha years. The owner gave up hope. So the guy escapes from jail. Yeah, he's a free man. But Rava, the question is according to Rava. He said the halacha of our Mishnah is acha years. So, and even acha years, which Taka, that was a big chiddush to a Rava that explained to Shimon Gamliel. He had explained that, oh, anyway, you're going to be enslaved because you don't want every slave to throw himself to the giyasas, to the troops, and free himself out. So that was a big chiddush. So if even over there he holds that he's going to become a slave, so then kasher birchen birchen, for sure it's a kasher birchen birchen. Because how could you say that he's always going to be a slave, and yet in Rabbi Yochanan is saying that if he gets out of jail, if he runs out, he's going to be a free man. How could that be? I thought he'll always be, because you don't want him to throw himself to the troops. Some Rabbi would tell you, no, it's not difficult. Why not? Because what's the reason of Shimon in the Mishnah? As we explained in the previous daf. Why is it that no matter what, even the guy was already miyash, and even though the guy, let's say, freed him to be a free man, anyway, he's going to go back and become a slave to the first master. We said Mishum the Chizkiah. We said because of the Chizkiah's logic, which was because we're afraid. We don't want him to submit himself to captivity, hoping to be redeemed. Yeah, but Rabbi Yochanan's case, that's different because Bereach Shani, when he flees, is different. Why is it different? Because if he's giving himself open to be shot, because if he has to run away from captivity, he realizes that if they catch him, they're going to shoot him, they're going to kill him. You're running away from jail, the dogs are after you, they're going to kill you. And he's trying to run away, and he's going to throw himself. If he risked his life to escape from his captors, certainly would not place himself into their hands in the first place. Why is he running away? If you are that situation that you ran away, obviously you didn't try to do it deliberately. So therefore, that wouldn't be valid for the concern of Chizkiah. And therefore there, in that situation, yeah, Rabbi Yochanan would agree that he would go free. And therefore it doesn't contradict Rava. Now the Gemara brings a story that Amsi de Bar Shmuel, Ishtaboy, the maidservant of the master Shmuel, had been taken captive. Parku l'shumam hasa. So other people said, oh, we remember she's the lady that works for Shmuel. So they redeemed her for the purposes of remaining a maidservant of Shmuel. And they sent this woman back to Shmuel. They sent to Shmuel the following message. It said on the memo, Anan Kirib Shmuel Svirlan. We hold like Shmuel, which, if you recall, you're always going to be an Eved anyway, no matter what the purpose of the redemption was from. But that's what they said to Shmuel. Even if you hold like the Rabbanon, that sometimes, if let's say it was redeemed for the purposes of being free, then the slave will be free. But don't worry, we anyways redeemed it for the purpose of being made servant. Now, so Gemara explains, because Ve'inhu, these other people who redeemed her to be a maidservant, they thought that Lifnei Yir Shava, that Shmuel was not Meyayish yet. And if Shmuel wasn't Meyayish, they thought that you learned the Mishnah like Abaya, that if he was not Meyayish, and if he's not Meyayish and you learn like Abaya, so good. So then if they're redeeming her for the purposes of being an Eved, like the Tanna Kama said, that you're being an Eved. You always can be an Eved. That's what he said. We hold the Rishim Gamliel. But even though you do the Rabbanon, that sometimes you go free, that's only if they're redeeming a purpose of being Ben Chayim. If you're doing a purpose of being an Eved, the purpose of it, so don't worry, she's your Knecht. But says the Gemara below here, it's actually not what the case was. It actually was La'achir Yishav. Now, if you learn like Abaya, you already gave up hope, so then it's not going to be his. He was learning the Mishnah only because it would be 4 years. He actually Shmuel already gave up hope. So the Gemara tells us, Shmuel, not only did he not enslave her, so actually, and this is where the Gemara gets into the discussion, even a bigger chiddush, that he didn't even require her to get a document of emancipation of a shtar shiur. Why not? Because Shmuel goes according to his reasoning. That the Amar Shmuel says, a mafker avdoi, if someone declares his slave ownerless, so then actually yotz l'cheres, the person goes free, and the ve'enetzach get shiur, and does not need to have a document of emancipation, because yish is like hefker. So the fact that he was meyayish, it really qualifies for the halacha of hefker, and you don't need to be meshacher. Why not? Because Shem says a pasuk in Shemais. The pasuk says v'chol evet ish, that every slave of a man, which Rashi points out the word ish is superfluous. It should just say every slave. Every slave of a man, miknas kesef, that's acquired by his money. So the question becomes, what, evet ish, the slave of a man, but evet ish is not the slave of a woman? What does that mean? You think a woman cannot acquire a slave? No, Ella, rather, what does the pasuk of the word ish come to tell me? A slave that the master has dominion over him. That's what it means. He's a slave of a man that is a master over him. So he's called a slave. If the master has no rights in the meaning, if the slave is going free, in it's not called a slave, and if it does not need ishtar shiur. So this slave woman that went free because Shmuel was already meyayish, so that was already like hefker, and different than hefker, so it's not his. It's different. Not only that, but it doesn't require ishtar shiur.
What does ish come to teach you?
That there's a master. Ish is like a term of a master of a.
It could be a woman.
Yeah. It's just saying that you have to have a master over him. If there's no master, because like here where you're meyayish already, then you don't even need a shtar shiur. You're not called a slave anymore. Another story brings the Gemara. Amsid the Rabbi Bar Zutra ishtaboy. The maidservant of Rabbi Abba Bar Zutra was taken captive. Parka hu Talmudah. So a very different type of a story. A non-Jewish man who is from Talmud redeemed this maidservant. L'shem Itzah, he wanted to take her as a wife. So sholchu leila the day. So the people sent a message to Rabbi Abba. If you want to do the right thing, send your former slave woman a get shecher. So the Gemara wonders, what's the case talking about? Meaning, if he could redeem her because the non-Jew is willing to sell her for a price, so why does he have to send her shtar shiur? Why doesn't he redeem her for the purposes of remaining to be his slave? And if he cannot redeem her, so what is he gaining by sending her a shtar shiur? As Rashi explains, well, she's anyways under the dominion of the non-Jew. What's the shtar shiur going to do? She's anyways subdued in his possession. The Gemara says, no. Truth is, he was able to redeem her. But v'kibin the meshada lagitu decharusa is maybe just, it would have costed too much. But once he sends her a shtar shiur, chavure mechaber. So then the people of the city are going to gather together hadadi with each other, uparkal, and then they're going to redeem her. Because as Rashi explains, but for the purposes of her remaining a slave woman, people would not be willing to redeem her because they don't hold like a b'shim gamliel. If you recall in our Mishnah, that was the machlekes. If people are going to be willing, according to Abaye, if people are going to be willing to redeem a slave woman or not. They're not going to be willing to. So therefore, even though he wasn't Meyayish yet, if people redeeming the slave to be for the purpose of Ben Chayrin, they'll be Ben Chayrin. What's heist? He wasn't Meyayish. It's Man Knech. Doesn't make a difference. I'll stick an oilam. We're gonna make him or her free because else no one's gonna redeem that slave. But Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg held that no, that people would redeem a slave, but they held Nalag Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, and they held that if you redeem, if send her shtar shecher, people will redeem her. So send her shtar shecher, then people will chip in together and redeem her. But that's one approach. If you want, you could say a different pshat. The truth is, no, he wasn't. There was no price tag on this woman. This non-Jew really liked this slave woman, and he's not releasing her. So what's the purpose of then sending her a shtar shecher? No, but even but once he sends in the mail, he sends a shtar shecher mitazla ba'pei. She's going to be degraded in his face because now they're going to family say, "What's this?" Everyone jumps out. The Amazon truck comes out. All the kids start doing it. It's like a chasna. Everyone's excited. What's this package? And they open up and they see that it's a shtar shecher. She was a Jewish maidservant. Oh, it's going to be degraded that this is your new wife. So a mafik law. Then he'll redeem her, meaning he'll take according to what the redemption money is. And therefore, even though he wasn't willing to sell her, that was the purpose of doing this scheme, sending a shtar shecher, and then he would be willing to redeem her. Now the Gemara wonders, really, is that so? That it would be degrading if people find out that this woman was a Jewish slave woman? But the master says in Mesechus the non-Jews, it's so dear to them to mate even with the animals of a Jew. Yishim should say more than their wives. They love the Jewish animals. So a slave woman is not worse than the animal. So what are you telling me that they're going to be embarrassed of the fact that it's a Jewish slave woman? Says when did we say this? That for them they like the Jewish stuff is only discreetly. But in public, milsa, it's degrading for them. So they're going to say, Jewish, and they're going to say that's it, and they're going to throw it away, and then we'll be able to get the slave woman back. Now another story related. Again, these are all regarding the slave women. So there was a slave woman that was in Pumbedisa that became abdi ba'inchi isura. People were doing prohibited things with the slave woman. So Abai says, look, if not for the fact Rabbi Shmuel says, whoever frees his slave violates a positive commandment in the Torah that it says in that you're always supposed to enslave these avadim. So you violated the positive commandment of Lo'olam if you free them. If not for that, I would force her master because of Gitin Daf, and I would have him write her a document of emancipation that you can marry a Jewish man. Oh, you're married to a Jewish man. I'll say I'll cut anyone's throat off, whoever touches my wife, and he'll protect her. So therefore, but a slave woman is a slave woman. She's a hefker. She's a free thing, and therefore people are doing prohibited things to her. So says Abaya, if not for this Isur Dairaisa, I would force the master to free her. Now Ravinam says it's not true. He says Kiha, actually such a situation, Rabbi Yehuda would agree that actually you are allowed to free her, Mishum Milsa di Isura, because of something prohibited. Meaning when people are doing Isurim with this woman, then you actually are allowed to. It's not a violation of the Isur if it's to prevent people from doing Isurim with this woman. Now the Gemara says, Vabaya, what? Mishum Isur Eloi? He doesn't hold that because of an Isur you're allowed to free a slave. But Ha'amar Rav Chanina bar Rav Katina Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, there was a story where one woman, what happened was there's two owners. One owner is retiring. He says, you know what, Stacy, you were doing such a good job for me all these years. I'm going to free you. But Stacy was owned by Reuven and Shimon. Reuven was done, so he freed her. But Shimon still owed her, so she's what's called a half shifcha, half baschayr. So as a Gitin Daf Beis, the kafa is rabba. So they forced Shimon, the other master, v'asa baschayr, and he made her into a fully fledged free woman. Why? Because Rashi explains, in her current status of chatzi, she wasn't fit not for evet, not for bachayrin, because of the part that's free, the evet can. Part that's evet, the Jewish person can. he explains it's not because a woman is commanded in Pir Rivya that Nebuch, this woman can't get married, can't have children, and therefore he freed her. No, it's because she wasn't fit and wasn't designated. So minig hefkenagaba. So that's it. Great. This is like anyone could do whatever they want with her. But with znuz, because there's no man that's her husband. So you see that when it's a devar isser, you're allowed to free a slave. So what's Abaya? What's he all concerned about? So you know, hachi asha, can you be the cases? Hasam over there, loyla ebed chaziv leben karin chaziv. She's not fit for neither one of them. So yeah, you could free her. So he doesn't have to free her to make her married to a Jewish man. He could just say, tell the master, get her a husband, an eved, because she was a shivcha. And therefore, Abai didn't hold it. That would be a situation that would allow you to go ahead and free her and violate the issa, the raisa, the mitzvah say of loim ben tabaydu. Now, Gufa, the Gemara goes back now. Once we mentioned this, no, because it's terrible things. Yeah, right. But definitely seems like it's not so ideal, and that's why the other mandama says Yama Meg. But La'eved is nicht the Zabazachvia Yiddishaman. Yiddishaman looked to Hilchas Snias, Nisharoskain. This is the under the Zach, and the Eved is nicht the Zalbazach. By help, no, there's a Isra, so that wouldn't allow me to do that. Do a Eved Kenoichet Epestin. That wouldn't allow us to be violated the Isra Reis. Now, Gufa, the Gemara goes back to now explain this that was quoted. Amar Yehuda Meshmul says, "Kol ha'mashachar abdu, whoever frees his slave, oiv ba'aseh violates a positive commandment." So it says the pasuk mikra lo'il mem tavaydu that you should always have them enslaved. You're not allowed to free him. Meisver the Gemara asks, really? We learned in the Brayso, Meiser Rebbe Eliezer shenichnas basic. He came into shul, lematzah sara, didn't find a minyan people. Shainan azayga, what's guy do for? The minyan is nishdu. V'shicher avdoi. So he took his slave. You know what? Atenta. He took his slave and they freed him. Bishlam Nasar, and he complained for the minion. What do you mean? I thought you're not free. The Issa deraisa of Loim Batavoidu. Says the Gemara, mitzvah shani. A mitzvah is different. So those are the two exceptions that we spoke about. One is regarding a mitzvah, and one is regarding when it's to avoid people doing isur. But the Gemara actually asks on the answer the Gemara just gave. Waha? Parsh Zucha. Oh, meaning he's saying how could mitzvah, meaning what type of mitzvah he's saying? Does it have to be a mitzvah deraisa, he's saying? Rabbi Shloimy, what's the head of Bachlal? It's asay dich asay, like what's going on over here? Unless you say that maybe when like Mishra Surah, what does that mean? It's very arbitrary. They say that it's like a derais in Parshas Zucha. Oh yeah. But the Gemara has a question. The Gemara says, "Turn about in the Brayso that lo elam mem tavoidu." The Gemara is from the following Brayso as follows. Why do you have to say the answer you just gave? The pasuk said "lem mem tavoidu." Says the machlek is actually how to translate lo elam mem tavoidu. Why? Because one mandama says this as lem tavoidu is actually rishus. Divrei Bishmol. Bishmol says. This Loim Tavodu doesn't mean it's a chiyuv, it means you're allowed to. Meaning, as Rashi explains, regarding the Shiva Umois, the 7 nations of Canaan, the Torah tells you, Lo techay kol neshama. You're not allowed to leave them alive. So you have to say a pasuk that b'mnei teishavim, from those of the teishavim, that the residents, Loim Tavodu, them you could enslave them. Meaning, it's come to permit, like Rashi explains, you have one of a different nation. Let's say a Swedish person comes along, and he gets married to a Canaanite woman, which she's from the 7 nations, and they have a child, you're allowed to acquire that child as a slave, as the Gemara explains in Perek HaMakan, in Seidah Daf Gimel and Aleph, because the tate is nishta Kanani. So Loim Tavodu is not medafes. It said memeg, because the Kanani you have to kill them out. You're not taking them as a vadim. Loim Tavodu says it's out of shis. You're allowed to. Kivayim says no chayva. It's saying medaf, memiz. Hosta evid, you have to keep mali. So says the Gemara. V'dilma, if that's the case, maybe Rebbe Elazar Sabala command Amirashus. Maybe it could be Shmuel that you're allowed to, but you don't have to. So why are you pushing me to answer to say, "Oi, what's the Rebbe Elazar Gitin? Mitzvah shani is going to mitzvah v'na minyan. Nav kimna azar mitzvah shani." And Pashazuch, whatever it was. But what do you mean? Maybe a lot of them mishacherim. That's how it is. He also could be Shmuel. What's the grace of kasha bamba kasha? No, let's say that you can't entertain that. Why not? And the explicit Rabbi says obligation. We know who's like Rabbi Kiva. So if you couldn't say like Rabbi Shmuel. That was the question. That was chayvin. All of it is mitzvah say. That's you have to say mitzvah shami. Now Amar Rabbi says that bahani tlas mili regarding these three things, nachsi balabatim and nechsean. The balabatim, the wealthy people, they lose their money because of three things. Okay, let's pay attention. What is it? Number one, the mafke avdai lecherusa, because they let their slaves go free and they violate a positive commandment in the Torah. Number two, udesairi nechsayu, they check out their fields b'shabbata on Shabbos to know what it needs. Now, obviously, today's times that wouldn't be necessarily checking out their fields; it'd be checking the paper, the stocks, whatever's going on to know what's titzach by their nechusim on Shabbos. And number three is the kavis sedusayu b'shabbata. They make their meals on Shabbos be'idim be'medrasha. The time when the Ruv gets up to darshan, the drasha to the rabbin, they're sitting and they're eating. Now, I don't know if it's the Kiddush Club, I don't know when it is, when the Ruv darshan, there is by the Shabbos, by the Shabbos in the Shacharis, or the Nechmittig, when he gives his shiur in the Nechmittig, then they're sitting and they're eating, whatever, but they should have done it earlier or later, not when the Ruv is giving his Derusha. Because the Amr Reb Chia Bar, that's why they lose their money. There was two families in Yerushalayim. One of them, they made their meals on Shabbos, meaning, which we said at the wrong time on Shabbos. One made the Suda on Erev Shabbos. Both of them were uprooted. So the one on Shabbos, we just explained because they made it when the Ruv Darshans, that's when they made their Sida. The other one, what's Erev Shabbos? So Rashi explains two pshatim. Either it means on Friday night. What's the problem making your Suda on Friday night? Because the halacha is that the covet of the day Suda is supposed to be greater than the covet of the night Suda. And they were intending, he says that's not covet Shabbos because covet Yom Kodim covet Laila. V'hemay miskavnim b'shvil bittul beis hamedrash. He says what their intention was because, I think the way what Rashi means to say is that, no, that's the next pshat. But the first pshat is that they wanted to learn more during the daytime. They wanted to spend time learning. So, this was 20-minute Suda, right? The problem is that they made the big Suda Friday night, a big Suda, they pick out the big salmon and this and that, whatever. The problem is that the main Suda is supposed to be covered ayayim. This day Suda is supposed to be bigger. So that was a choice that they made, and that's why they lost their famegin. Or another pshat is, it means be'erev Shabbos, meaning megamacht atoyemeho. Friday afternoon, a big spread, and because of their great wealth. Now, although every single day they do that, that's okay. But on Erev Shabbos, that's an issur because you're supposed to come into Shabbos hungry. And they came in as a result. Who could eat nachatay meho, kigel, mit kishke, mit I don't know whatever's on the groaning board. So therefore, that's why they lost their money because of related to the Shabbos Siddur for many of these different shots and what there was. Now, Amar Rabba, it says hamakdish avdoi, someone that sanctifies his slave, yotzlacher, he goes out free. So the Gemara, my time, what's the reason? So the Gemara says, because gufei loy kaddish, he's not making his body holy because the slave cannot be slaughtered on the mizbeach, and neither could it be part of the bedek habayis. He can't be used as like a beam or whatever it is. So, and ledmei loy kamar, he didn't sanctify him for his monetary value because he should have said demei abdi olai, the monetary value of my slave is on me. So what was his intention then? Must be his intention is that the lahava am kaddish kamar. He was saying that it should be from the holy people. I mean, a full-fledged Jew, because it says ki am kaddish out, you're holy people. As Rashi explains, and that's you can't compare it to when someone's makdish a behemoth to me, a non-kosher animal. There, of course, because you can't say you want the animal to be from the heilige folk am kaddish. So obviously, you're saying that you want the non-kosher animal to be for its monetary value. Because even though he didn't say its monetary value is on me, what he's saying is it should be holy to be sold. But over here, by the person where his body could have a terminology of holiness, you're not saying it's for the monetary value. You're saying that it should be a holy person. That's one halacha. Another related halacha is Rav Yosef Amarav. That was one teaching in the name of Rav. That was Rabbi Amarav. Rav Yosef Amarav, he says, Hamafker Avdi, someone declares a slave ownerless, Yotzlacheres, he goes out free. So the Gemara explains. Mandam, according to Rabbi, says the case of makdish koshke mafkir. Hefker is for sure making a person a free person. But Mandam mafkir, according to Rabbi Yisrael, that said the case of mafkir him, that's when he would go free of a makdish life, but sanctifying him not. Because Dimel may come and maybe meant that it's for his monetary value, because that's a makdish a lot of times is for the monetary value for the bedek abayis. Now, Boilu, the following question, however, that Sarach, does the case of makdish and mafkir, do they require get shiur or get of emancipation, or lo yitzarach, or maybe they don't because he's already free? Tashema says Gemara is being a right because the Amr of Chia bar Aban Amar Rabbi says echad zeh that either one of these cases of makdish and mafkir yatzal chayz goes out free, but v'tzarach get shiur, he needs to have a get shiur, which is not, if you recall, like Shmuel that we mentioned before. Shmuel held once you're mafkir, he doesn't need to get shiur. No, Rav said both of them require get shiur. Now Amar Rabbi says we asked on our own teaching, meaning Rabbi had said in the name of Rab the halacha of a makdish of the yotz l'chedus, that he asked from the following brisa. The brisa says a case of a makdish nechasim. If someone sanctifies his nechasim, v'hoyi ben avadim, and in the nechasim there was avadim. So the halacha is ein hagizbarim rishoin lohitzin l'chedus, so that the gaboim, the treasurers, are not allowed to go ahead and let him go free. Meaning, even if they receive from the slave redemption money, the Gemara Kedushin of Chav Gimel Beis tells us that an Eved could acquire himself with money if, let's say, someone else gave him money on the condition that his master has no rights in it, because usually say Yad Eved Yad Rabbi, he could redeem himself from his owners. But these Gizbarim of Hektish are not allowed to do that because their body is not acquired to Hektish, because he only sanctified his Eved for his monetary value. And this would be considered not as a Mechira, but as a Shichur. But the Gizbarim could sell him to others, and then the money goes to Hektish, and then the others could go ahead and let him go free if they want to. On that Rabbi Yomi says, no, I say he could even give it his own money and could go out, meaning if he finds a person that could give him money on the condition that his master doesn't have, he could free himself that way also. Because it's like the Gizber is selling him loy to himself, meaning just like he'd sell some to others, as long as it's through a medium of a sale, not through redemption, he could sell him, so to speak, to himself too. But one thing is, you see that if someone is makdish and eved, what do you see? That he's not going free. We see in this case that he's kaddish ladamav, and not to be am kaddish, to be a free person. That contradicts the teaching that Rabbi said in the name of Rab, that he becomes a free person because he should be from am kaddish. Says Gemara, Rab, you're taking a brayz to ask on Rab. Rav Tana, who Polik, Rab is a Tana, and he could disagree. That's not a difficulty. But Gemara's Tashma is being a raya from the following brayz. The pasuk says in Yikra, says Akal Chayrim Begoimer, which the pasuk there concludes, like Rashi the Mascha brings, that any Chayrim Asher Yachim Ishla Hashem, that person is going to make hektish to Hashem, Mekolish, whatever he has for himself, Me Adam Ad Behema, whatever. So it says from Adam. So what's Adam? What are you being makdish? Elo Avodah B'Shav Chayis V'Kanam. This is his non-Jewish slaves or slave women. Meaning if he's makdish them, they're mekudish to bedek habayis. And now you're learning from a pasuk that it can be kadush bedek, which is what a Chayrim is. That's difficult to Rav. Rav said that they go free. Says Gemara, in this brayz says Damalad May, where he said it should be for the monetary value. He said Dam of Alayla Hektish. He didn't mention a title of Kedusha. He said Dam of. So if that's the case, Idach Nami, why did you explain the previous brayz that Rab is a Tana and could disagree? Why didn't you explain that also Damalad May, as you said, for the money? If that's the case, the brayz wouldn't read well. So what's in a gizbar mishum lohitzin l'ches? What are you saying that the treasures don't have permission to let them go free? Gizbar ma'avatai. What do the treasures have to do over there? In other words, what would you have thought that they have any rishus on the eved, but the master only sanctifying upon his monetary value? And if you're going to ask, why didn't you explain it, for example, where he said, Hadeyu Kaddish Lidamav, where now he is holy to be sold and he has the permission to sell him, like when you Makdish Karka and a Behemoth Tamei. And that says Rashi, no, that since it would apply by his body, Lashon of Kedusha, Am Kaddish, if you say like Rav, so when he says Hadeyu Kaddish Lidamav, he actually would take effect on his body to be a free person, because like we know, like when you Matvis Tamim Lebed Gabayis, where you don't leave from the Mizbeach, as the Gemara says, increases in Tamur, so therefore obviously the Mishnah must be disagreeing to say that when you say Hadeyu Kaddish, it's not Lashon Am Kaddish, it's only a Lashon of Hektish Shemach B'Damav, and that's why we said it disagrees with Rav. But this brisa, yeah, it wouldn't make sense, like we're saying, to say that it's talking about like Rav. When he says you sell them to others, others come to go free. What are you selling? You can't sell him. He was only kaddish for his damav. It was only monetary value. But so moreover, Rabbi Yomi says, give his own money, he can leave. Like he's selling him to himself. Again, there's only for his monetary value. What does it mean like he's selling to him? So therefore, that's why the Gemara says that we couldn't say this over there, and that's why that was a different type of a case. So one last raya, Toshmat's being a raya, Nalik Rabba. The Bryce says, Hamakdish Abde, someone sanctifies a slave. So he said, Oisa, the slave could do work, and he could eat, meaning his Maisi Daim is not Hektish. He only sanctified his monetary value. And he only said, Hadeyu Hektish Ladamav, and therefore he's like a piece of real estate or a non-kosher animal, and we see that it doesn't go free. So that seems to contradict Rabbi, who says that when you makdish him, he goes free. So on that says the Gemara, Gitin Daf of Hamani, who's the town over here? It's Rameir that he says, a person does not say his words for hektish l'batala in vain. As the Gemara, there's the Bryce and Erich and Daf and Av says that you take an Erich value of someone that's less than a month old. Rameir says you have to give his monetary value because the person knows there's no Erich in less than a month old. So what are you saying? If he's saying for the monetary value, here also he knows an Eved is not fit not to bring as a carbon, not to be built as a part of the structure. And since you're saying it Lashon of hektish, so you're making up your mind that you want to be makdish damav, and therefore it's for damav, and therefore yeah, he's not going a free person. Because it's like Remeir that you wouldn't say it in vain. Says that's logical. The Sefer there says, if he sanctifies himself, a person, he also works and he could also eat. If he only sanctifies monetary value, not his body itself. Now, if it says Remeir, and the reason is not because he's makdish stam, that you say he's makdish limacher, rather because the person not going to be moited tala, like he says that it's dama b'lai, and that he has monetary value. That's why he has to give his money because the person knows his body's not kaddish, and he's saying it for the purpose of damim. So Shabbat that would make sense. I'm Rabbani, but if you're going like Rabban, the reason is because when someone's makdish stam, someone that's not royal goofy, you're saying it's ladama to be sold. So then Bishlema Avdu understand his slave, then you could say that stama is letmei koi, it's ready to be for its monetary value to be sold, and it's holy kaddish limacher, but the guy himself, could you say that he's there for to be sold? He's holy to be sold. What do you think? There's monetary value for a free person? What type of sale is there? Obviously, it's like a mayor, and it's not that it sounds like that because it's lidmei. It's rather because the person will not say his words in vain. So he's making up and he's saying that my monetary value should be on me, and that's why he's saying hareini hektish, where you evaluate him like a slave, not to be sold. So to but also the gizbarim have no rishos; they only have the monetary value on the owner, and therefore Rabbi, however, is like the chachamim, and therefore when you say like the chachamim, you say lahav kaddish, it would be lam kaddish, and therefore that's not a contradiction from this, which is going like your mayor. Thank you anytime hosting.